Hello, everyone. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I'm feeling a little silly today. Sorry if that was weird. Okay, part three. We're here. The Lotus Sutra, touted in many different circles of literature and history and scholarship as one of the great sutras from Asia on the teachings of Buddhism. I think I already said this previously, but it bears mentioning again. We're all ourselves seekers. And, we're human beings. We tend to be very selfish. Even when we try not to be, often, often it's going to be a silly day. Often, even when we try to do something non-selfish, especially if we think of it in that way, we tend to be doing it for selfish reasons. We want to appear selfless and so forth. Anyway, I won't spend all day on that. My point is this. Organizations of any sort very quickly become much more concerned about the health and welfare of the organization, and in a capitalist country like the US, money, then they rapidly lose focus or centered focus on their membership and what the membership needs. Boy, I didn't realize how good that analogy was for the state of affairs politically in the US today, political stats today. I mean, we got the 1% that want to hoard all the money and somehow expect the rest of us to just produce it for them for nothing. That's the organization of the United States government, which was meant to be us. Remember, we the people? Anyway, tangent, like I told you. Sorry, it may be a very silly part three, but I'm going to hit some meat here, so I don't want to distract you. Not doing a good job so far. Here's my point. Again, my second point. Because organizations are like this, because humans tend to be that way, but certainly in a capitalist environment, we tend to be trained, all of us individually, to behave that way. What I find is a lot of lay organizations, independent groups, and especially more to my distaste, actual bona fide sects with lineage, whether it's Nichiren or Tendai or any sect. But my concern is with the Lotus Sutra. And everywhere I've been and tried to participate in other groups, there was value, but there was always followed by that mentality, which you can see in not just Buddhism, any organization, okay? You read our book, that's the book, that's the truth. You don't read anybody else's, you don't read anything else, you don't listen to what anyone else is saying. We're the only ones. We're it. This is the Lotus Sutra, just everything's in that. And I think I did now, as I'm hearing myself, did mention this before. My problem with that isn't that the Lotus Sutra may not be the eminent book of Buddhism, but maybe I grew up this way, a bit skeptical. So my first question when you tell me something is ultimate is why? What makes it ultimate? Why is it? What's the foundation on that statement? Well, read here in chapter 2. Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. But on whose shoulders does that stand? I mean, I'm prepared to accept that this is the point of the pyramid, so to say, the cap on the whatever. But in order to have that status, just that alone, it must be because it stands on or over or around in some relation to a whole bunch of other stuff? And the answer is really simple. The answer is in the way Buddhism was taught, which I have also mentioned in many videos. It's taught in stages like mathematics. And if somebody came up to you and said, here's a new book on quantum wave theory, how everything in the universe exists, you don't have to read anything else. I don't think a scientist worth his salt would say that, but it can happen, right? Uh, Without knowing even something as basic as mathematics, maybe some chemistry, maybe maybe even some calculus. Eek. But even without the calculus, you could get a lot of. I got a lot out of the book on A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. Now, I've studied chemistry at the college level. I've been in the petrochem industry. I've done a lot of high tech information, computer programming, those kind of things. And although they may not have directly related to my reading of that book, the knowledge of those things was at play. And it made things in the book click to me on a level that was very profound to me. Now, maybe others don't need, maybe others need more profundity to really go, man, this is amazing, right? Well, for me, all of that study in the sciences, and at one time, I may have mentioned it somewhere else, I was looking to be a nuclear chemical engineer in the research area, because I love that environment. And chemistry was just one of those things that, when you have, I have this theory about talent. When you have true talent, whatever that is, whether it's in numbers or art or whatever, it's usually the one thing you don't respect about yourself. Isn't that odd? For the very reason that it's your talent, because it just falls out of you. It's just easy to you. So you don't tend to respect it, even though, people tell you your whole life from childhood on up that, oh, I couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. You can do that. That's amazing. And you tend to look at them and go, what kind of dork are you that you can't just do that, because you don't respect it, because it's your talent. Anyway, there's another branch. I'm watching myself on this one. Anyway, Buddha, or Shakyamuni himself, uh, exhorted his disciples to study broadly all of Buddhism, not just what he was teaching that day. Um, and a lot of the reason he said that is because he understood that he was being forced in a way to teach in stages so he could bring these disciples along perceptively, expand their understanding of the world, their perception of their own mind and how things work. And then once he taught this, and it took him 12 years at one stage, he goes, and a lot of times you'll read this in the preamble to the Lotus Sutra, in the Immeasurable Sutra, Measurable Meaning Sutra. He says, what I've taught for 42 years, I have not taught the truth. Well, he goes on to say, of course, that those were all skillful means. They weren't lies. It's just that I had to take you to this level for you to get something that when I came in with this level, you you wouldn't have to jump 4 floors. You gradually came up 1 floor at a time, and now here you are, easily getting to the 5th floor, so on and so forth. So that is often interpreted by groups of sects, organizations, as meaning this is it. Throw all that rest of that stuff in your way. It's irrelevant. But that's not what he said. So I think you understand what I'm saying about that. And the reason I'm saying is because I'm going to read a bunch of excerpts today from the document I've been talking about, which I have posted online. An excerpt from the Prajnaparamita Sutra in 32 chapters. I think I may have that actual book printed out in my own form on my my book site on lulu.com/Kwoon, Kwoon. If not, I'll review that and I will make it available so that you can get a copy. I really, 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 really encourage you to read the whole thing and think about it. Um, I actually think this is the preamble to the Lotus Sutra. I actually think this teaching is the Lotus Sutra, and it is what makes the Lotus Sutra so important, because the Lotus Sutra stands on directly on the shoulders of all of the Perfection of Wisdom sutras. This one in particular, and I'll show you why. Right off the bat here, he's talking about Mara, and if you're students of the Lotus Sutra, and hopefully you've read it at least once, and you've gotten lost in a lot of the repetition and so forth, go back and reread it, especially after you read this, because the transfer of terms and ideas, it's so linked that you will wonder how you ever approached learning the merit of the Lotus Sutra without having this in your mental arsenal first. I'm serious. If you study this sutra, this teaching, the Lotus Sutra will suddenly open many doors for your mind. I'm absolutely convinced of it. And I'm so convinced that I'm making this series about that very thing, because I know that after hearing a bunch of this from the Perfection of Wisdom, you will then understand the Lotus Sutra a quantum leap further than you do right now. This is from the Mara's Deeds chapter 11. And Mara is, again, Buddhism is filled with these proper names given to aspects of human behavior. They're not real people. They're not gods. They're not apparitions. They're an easy label to say, what do we say all the time in the Lotus Sutra? The Sansoshima, right? The leader of the gods of disturbances and negative thoughts and that kind of thing, right? And Sansoshima comes from where? Closest things to you, family, then friends, then work associates. They can be sources of obstacles to your practice, Sansoshima, right? Well, Sansoshima is a formation of Mara, okay? Mara is a much, rather than a deified specificity of different aspects of your life, Mara is all of it. It is like samsara. It is the obstacles in your life of a samsaric condition. So it's kind of a global kind of thing. And in it, he starts talking about, how hard it is to practice the correct teaching. And I know you've heard, if you're studying the Lotus, if you're Nichiren of some sect, or any other Lotus school, Pure Land, whatever. I'm not going to be nitpicking that right now, because I'm really wanting to talk about the supremacy of the Lotus Sutra. And if you're asking yourself the same question I always did, what makes it supreme? Well, this is what I'm talking about. So he's talking about, in this sutra, uh, the rarity of the opportunity to practice this correctly. And by practicing correctly, he uses the term perfection of wisdom, which is more like a concept. So this pure cognition common to beings beyond number, again, this is right after he's saying every human being is a potential, not only a potential, you have the potential to live your life with the Buddha wisdom, Buddha way. We all have it within us, around us. We are of it. What's in our way is the samsaric veils of delusion and misunderstanding of what's really happening in our experience of a lifetime. That's an experiencing of life, not an experience of a lifetime. Okay. Yet exceedingly rare to be found and understood. Indeed, as rare as a turtle which happens upon a single life-preserving float amidst an infinite ocean, which ferries it upon its natural currents to a shore of rest and nourishment. Indeed, Subhuti, exceedingly rare is it. Does that sound familiar? You all studied it in the Lotus Sutra, especially if you're a Nichiren Buddhist. It's the old story about the sandalwood log that Nichiren talks about at length, and the hollow that fits this turtle in there just right so it doesn't cook in the sun and blah, blah, blah. So here it is in the perfection of wisdom. There's links all throughout this. It's exciting. Though all sentient beings possess this identical potential, some get rid of and abandon perfection of wisdom, which is the root of the comprehension of worldly and universal spiritual dharmas as these are, and instead decide to look for support in what are different branches. As a dog spurns a morsel of food offered by its master and takes a mouthful of water from a servant instead. Just so, beings recognized as implicitly related to this vehicle of bodhisattva spurn perfection of wisdom, which is the taproot revealing cognizance of all knowing, and yet decide to look for the core, for growth, for Buddhahood in the vehicles of disciples as Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, which corresponds to branches, leaves, and foliage. This also may be seen as done to them by Mara, to the influence of ego, the influence of cravings and desire, conceit. And I realize once again, he's hammering hard on those of his disciples. I mean, he's teaching them how to attain Buddha wisdom and free themselves, liberate themselves, and all sentient beings. And some of his disciples decide, if I know how to liberate myself, that's all I need. And I think it makes him kind of angry. But, he's not going to be angry. He's reached Buddha knowledge. He's a great teacher, right? But still, it's annoying to watch the students he spent all of his life leading them there, and they decide, I know better. Really? So he goes on. Again, all beings have equal potential, yet do not equally recognize concentrated right effort and mindfulness towards perfection of wisdom, and apply this hereby nourishing condition of all knowing. Still, most of us, at one time or another, get rid of, abandon, spurn, or even simply forget perfection of wisdom, and decide to study, as if superior to this, sutras by which we welcome the level of disciple or pratyeka Buddha, learning and realization, which are compared to branches, leaves, and foliage. A bodhisattva does not train in the same way in which a being recognized as belonging to the vehicle of disciple or pratyeka Buddha is trained. Now this is critical. This is why I'm reading this. This is also why the Lotus Sutra and the Mahayana in general is held as the great vehicle, the fully encompassing enlightenment and full awakening of the Buddha mind, embodied in the practice of the Bodhisattva way. You understand the difference? The Buddha mind is something that exists without samsara at all. It's just potential. But the Bodhisattva way is a way of communing with that Buddha mind while still maintaining this body in samsara. Now, this is a critical point. And just to illustrate it another way, Buddhism technically, Shakyamuni was a bodhisattva while he was still in human form, teaching all of this. He became fully enlightened to the Buddha mind, and yet remained in this bodily samsaric form in order to teach others, his mission being to liberate all sentient beings, right? Not just himself. This is specifically the Bodhisattva way. To be Buddha is to no longer being. So there is no Buddha person. There is Buddha mind, which is completely removed from samsara. However, you can experience it, know it, participate in it, while still here. That is the amazing potential described, and as he's describing here, within the Mahayana. In Hinayana, and I know that's a derivative term, but in the lesser vehicle of disciples and Pratyeka Buddhas, they reach Arhat, and let me read on, and I'll let you hear his words about this. How does a disciple and Pratyeka Buddha train? Well, I make up my mind thus. Following this teacher over here, and the knowledge I derive hereof, I in my turn teach others what I come to understand, and so one single self I have tamed, one single self I pacify, one single self I lead to final nirvana. Thus, I undertake exercises and practices which are intended to bring about wholesome roots for the sake of taming myself, pacifying myself, and leading myself to nirvana. So he's not denying that they can, through that practice, they have enough teaching from him that they can find the Buddha mind. But their enlightenment, their liberation, so to speak, has what later starts to be termed remainder. In other words, if you live your life alone, you're going to struggle with a lot of stuff that goes through your mind. And liberating yourself from all those struggles, that's pretty amazing. So, yeah, that's pretty amazing. But how many relationships have you been in your life? With your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, another person, a schoolmate, a workmate, a sports team. Any relationship you've had has confronted things in you that you never would have thought to experience on your own. And some of those struggles are the hardest struggles in life. And so by communing with others, we learn so much more about our own karma. So doesn't it make sense that by facilitating others' discovery of themselves, their path through to nirvana, to help them, helps us even more, and helps each other, because we're able to uncover each other's karma much faster than we are by ourselves, and at a much more granular, more expansive, more profound level, understanding, breakthrough. So what Shakyamuni is saying here, he's saying Bodhisattva practice is, I mean, you know how he talks, greater than the sands, granules of sands in 100,000 million codis of Ganges rivers. Greater. I mean, it's just uncalculably greater practice, because it achieves the goal of liberating all sentient beings. And by doing so, your personal, talk about, he doesn't leave out the selfishness in this. He's saying, if you want to attain the full blunt of awakening and enlightenment and release and the unfathomable joy and the preciousness that this life affords you to do that, You only can really get the full blunt of it if you help others. That's infinitely greater than just doing it for yourself. You're going to get something out of doing it, but it's pales. Okay? This is why the Lotus Sutra, built on all of this, the Lotus Sutra takes it a step further and talks about uh, 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 the existence of this Buddha mind being not just this wonderful thing you're discovering in our lifetime as I'm here alive, but that my life is irrelevant. This has been timeless. This is what you're connecting to. See, and the Pratyeka Buddha, the Arhat, they have a very limited perception of what that is. They don't see the massiveness of it, which is it's a terrible shame. Which is why it's called Hinayana. You're the little vehicle. You know, if you're not going to follow along, I can't waste time. Go away. You know, learn how to practice. So it's an admonishment. No lie. You're going to see it over and over again in this stuff. All right. Blah, 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 blah. The same is true of any persons who belong to the vehicle of the bodhisattvas who do not understand this perfection of wisdom and ask no questions. I like that because I'm a study hound. So he's basically saying if you really want to practice the bodhisattva way, you don't only practice so that you get it, but you ask questions about it. You don't leave any stone unturned. Okay, this works like this. How then? So if you're studying the Lotus Sutra and you're not looking beyond the Lotus Sutra, you're not practicing correctly. You have to study. And some people don't like me saying that. They go, no, Buddhism's all about meditation. And all I say is, what's your purpose in meditation? What do you do? What are you trying to achieve in meditation? Do you know? Because chances are, if you have any idea about what you're doing in meditation, it's because you studied something, you heard something, somebody told you something, you're repeating it, something you read, something. Study always comes first. Without study, you cannot deepen your understanding. With meditation, you can deepen your understanding of what you study. And by doing that, you create what? A strong mind of resolve and determination, conviction. Not the Western word they keep trying to feed faith into there. Because faith has too many dimensions, especially in our modern world, of believing something without proof. And that has nothing to do with Buddhism. Buddhism is based on the observable truth, your experience. It's a science, but it's not a material science. It's an energy science. It's a mind science. It's an experiential science. And what you experience and how you experience it, you can develop your understanding of it, and that's Buddhism. So moving on. The same applies to persons who avow themselves to this bodhisattva vehicle, the one vehicle. We're going to get to that. And who in some future reject this perfection of wisdom and seek for all knowledge through sutras associated with the level of Shravaka and disciple or Pratyeka Buddha. This also is seen as done to these ones by Mara. On the contrary, I certainly do not say, Bodhisattvas, seek for all knowledge through the sutras associated with the level of Shravaka as disciple or Pratyeka Buddha. Bodhisattvas certainly do not go forth to reveal supreme enlightenment unless trained in what Tathagatas have announced in the perfection of wisdom as the skill and means of these bodhisattvas. For the full knowledge of a bodhisattva is unknown in other sutras. This is the sutra where he makes it known. If a starving man refuses superior and excellent food and prefers to eat inferior and stale food, is he using the full potential of his intelligence? Ouch. I almost feel bad for Hinayana Buddhists. He slams them so hard. Just so, Subhuti, in the future, some bodhisattvas still refuse this perfection of wisdom. So, bodhisattva practitioners also make the same mistake. Um, and prefer the sutras associated with the level of Shravaka, the disciple, or Prataka Buddhas, and still seek all knowledge through sutras which welcome the level of disciple or Prataka Buddha. Do these bodhisattvas use the full potential of their intelligence? So here too, in the future, some persons belonging to the vehicle of bodhisattvas who, though these have got this deep and brightly shining gem of perfect wisdom, nevertheless think this should be considered equal to the vehicles of Sarvakas and disciples and Pratyeka Buddhas, and decide to seek all knowledge and skill in means on the level of disciple or Pratyeka Buddha. Are these using the full potential of their intelligence? Okay, let me skip a little bit because I think we got that point, right? Considered in our view with wisdom, all this is nothing but rebirth in suffering. I do not praise any kind of rebirth in becoming, because this lasts no longer than a finger snap, for everything conditioned is impermanent. I highlighted that because that also says something about his teaching of impermanence, and how as disciple, I have to be careful now, as moving forth in our bodhisattva practice, we have to understand what he means by emptiness. He doesn't mean to deny that we're experiencing what we're experiencing, but that we should understand what we're experiencing as something that is of the mind and not something in of itself real. Perfection of wisdom is a beginningless and thus endless source of all knowledge of Buddhas, the Lords, which in its turn is the source of endless devotion to Tathagatas, which leads immeasurable and incalculable beings to dissolve their defilements and obscurations by this simple revelation. Tathagatas of 3 times as well as beyond are enlightened perfection of wisdom. If you get perfection of wisdom, you will understand the understanding of Tathagatas. Those come, not come, well come, or well gone. In other words, they're not being, they're a state. It is as this perfection of wisdom, these Tathagatas are instructed and generated, and instruct and generate us in this world. So we may be instructed and generated, and instruct and generate as well. Thus we come, thus we go. Flashes of enlightenment and pure undifferentiated awareness. Undifferentiated awareness. No duality. Undifferentiated awareness. Identical with absolute emptiness. This dark as pitch notion, infinite as space. Now, what's 96? Is it 96%? It's like science today has only grasped there's different numbers from 4 to 6% of all matter in the universe, and they're starting to figure out that there's dark matter that they can't even see, but they can calculate it has to be there, and that's something like 20%, something in there. The rest, the vast majority of the universe, 73% of the universe, is energy that we don't have the technology to measure or see, so to speak, but it absolutely has to be there. So you can see there's parallels here. The undifferentiated awareness identical with absolute emptiness, this dark as pitch, pitch notion, infinite as space. Um, those are the very same descriptions you'd hear particle physicists talking about, 20 years ago. Absolute emptiness, vacuum, um, pitch black, infinite space. The same language almost 3,000 years ago. The five skandhas are by the Tathagatas declared as world or loka, which five? Form, feeling, perception, impulse, consciousness. These are all, you might want to look up the skandhas. I think I have some papers on that online at the threefoldlotus.com website. I think I have some publications at the bookstore as well. Vasubandhu wrote at length about that as well as others. Basically, the skandhas are those, what he just listed, as manufactured agglomerations of karma that present themselves in our life experience as consciousnesses. Remember, there are 9 consciousnesses in a full Mahayana practice. The first 6 being the senses, touch, smell, taste, sound, so on. Skandhas are shown and realized by this perfection of wisdom of Tathagatas as this world, loka, as these do not crumble nor crumble away, lujyante, pralujyante. I don't know why I'm putting a Latin accent on these, but these are Indian words. These 5 skandhas are emptiness as to any own being, and devoid of any own being and sameness, inasmuch as can be said with any meaning whatsoever of emptiness, so can neither crumble nor crumble away. As this sense, this perfection of wisdom instructs these Tathagatas in the world. As emptiness can neither crumble nor crumble away, so the signless, the wishless, the unaffected, the unproduced, non-existent, and all completeness of any realm of Dharma. Now he's starting to take apart what the Bodhisattva practice of perfection of wisdom means. And we're going to get deeper and deeper into what exactly does the Bodhisattva way mean? How should you be as a Bodhisattva considering knowing your experience, knowing what it is to have the Buddha, the Tathagata knowledge. And thus, this changes your worldview, your view of what life really is. Oh, my apologies. Moreover, Subhuti, due to this perfection of wisdom, Tathagatas quite naturally know immeasurable and incalculable beings as these really are. This comes about through the inevitable dissolution of obscurations, for herein is simultaneously revealed an increase toward or away from pure cognition, depending on one's perspective, and a relationship to these 6 perfections and noble eightfold path. Look who's come back to roost, the eightfold path. Primarily, right intention and right action. Eventually, this pinnacle awareness comes about as all knowledge. This is, however, completely different and other than bits and pieces of knowing formulated of some discursive thought process. This naked realization is of an objectless and purely undifferentiated experience of this uniform non-existence of any individualized or collective own being within any sentience whatsoever. Wow. Now, I'm a very image-oriented person. So to me, when I visualize that, Not that the whole movie works in this way, but the last part of the Matrix series, where Neo, um, the one, is standing in the hallway, and the agents are coming to get him. Uh, they come in at a T intersection down the hallway, and they see him, and there's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them, and he sees them, and there's that moment, that freeze moment, and then they all pick up their guns and start blasting, right? And at that moment, Neo stands there and he believes. He awakens, if you will, because I'm going to use this as an analogy for this so that you get it visually. I think it'll help. And the bullets start to slow down as they come toward him. And there's this kind of, this phase change that happens with his perception. And he just tells the bullets to drop down out of the air. They all tinkle on the ground, or tinkle as they hit the ground. And then the visual right after that is all of the walls, ceiling, floors of the hallway, as well as Neo and all of the guys with their guns, they all turn into those green streams of characters that you've seen on the computer monitors, right? And the whole scene becomes nothing but this information. This to me is a really good visual encapsulation of what is saying right here, is that when you achieve the Tathagata knowledge, the Buddha mind, you will see the world around you as well as yourself as non-physical. All the physical characteristics, the minutia of words and terms we use to subdivide everything disappears, and everything becomes just this flow of energy. And even though you're in this form as a human being, this is what allows you to, the word he uses, experience this permeability of everything, because none of it is really extant. It's just a representation of energy manifesting its desire to be. But in actuality, it's just energy, like everything else. So I remember when I was younger, I used to have this vision of everything in the universe, including human beings, being like the stars, that there's just this energy everywhere, great sheets of just white glowing particles, not even particles, just photons, just a lightness. And that wherever there was a human or a sentient being, it was like there was a gathering of a lot of that energy, and it would be like a brighter lump within the greater mist of this stuff. This is another way, which is very much like that computer code. And I remember seeing that when I was very young. And everyone I ever spoke to about it thought it was just a little nuts, so I didn't talk about it much. But I read this, and I'm remembering those visions and thinking, I think I don't get it in the way that I experience it, other than conjured in my mind. I am still working to the day when it actually happens. When I look around the room, and there are other people, and I really see my environment that way. Wow, man, that just blows me away. Um, Again, Tathagatas are naturally aware of thoughts and actions of immeasurable and incalculable beings, since here or anywhere, in any time, or in any way, for any beings, is no real existence. This indication only of something called existence exists neither as separate individualities, as many ones, nor any totality of individualities, neither any singular one, nor any grouping of two or more, and not even simply as one divided into many. Because ultimately, and this means even now, any beings and things are incalculable and immeasurable, and even still, Tathagatas again, due to this perfection of wisdom, are naturally aware of the collected thoughts of countless beings as only collected thoughts. And how do Tathagatas come to be cognizant of this? This is naturally cognized, for as pure awareness, this collectedness of thought is realized as equivalent to extinct. For anything called singular, lone, or individual thought, etc., speaking also in terms which are thought of as having an existential basis, and from some point of view in existence, do not exist, and is purely cognized as not other than already as infinitely absolute by Tathagatas. But this doesn't materialize or manifest as having been thought of. What does matter is truth, in truth is what is such as eventually becomes thought as any relative result of its original pristine continuum of absolution, or even what is any thought at any time or place a result of, in spite or regardless of what we may think. You're going to have to reread that a few times. But I'm hoping it gives you hints here that when you hear people talking about everything is one, oneness of Buddhism, that's not really accurate, because the oneness of Buddhism that people talk about is still a material thing. This isn't that at all. It is not. This is so much negation. This is not that. Okay, I'm going to go on. This extinction is just non-extinction. That's exactly what I'm saying. Excuse me. As this which is realized as extinct is no thing. To be extinct and as such is merely non-extinct. Furthermore, Tathagatas are naturally cognizant of distracted thoughts of beings such as these Tathagatas realize reoccupation with any thought as mere distraction. For just as objects of this world, even thought is known as external, and a grave distraction from this sourceless source, of which these are spontaneously manifest, with neither time nor limitation. You know, in the Kabbalah, the Jews talk about sparks of joy, sparks of life, sparks of godlikeness. There's a kind of a similarity here, that when Tathagata, Buddha mind, recognizes thoughts of others, he recognizes them not as thoughts, but as tiny little instantiations that just spontaneously pop up. Much in the way that we're created in the first place. If you watch my videos on the origins of life, the 3,000 realms in a single moment, Ichinen Sanzen, all those terms, I talk about how karmic energy forms from fundamental disturbances in the quiescent energy, and when perchance some of those are attracted to one another, they start to agglomerate and they start to build a sort of a chain, and that chain, as it forms, starts to have its own kind of inertia, or what we might call volition or will. This is when karma begins to assimilate, and goes through zillions of such amalgamations that sometimes just fall back apart and never become anything. And the ones that do instantiate a whole universe and you and I. So to be able to see that while in this form, it's got to be pretty incredible. So if you need motivation to do this, not even mindfulness can be. This is important because, again, we're transgressing, not transgressing, but we're talking about the limitations people, even Buddhist disciples, monks, put on themselves that they shouldn't. Not even mindfulness can be effortlessly directed as such toward this realm of Dharma. For even as in this consideration of the one divided into many, in truth, what is this dreamed of one anything other than as a basis from which to determine its singularity? As here is no thing other than this one has no thing or support upon which to lean to determine either itself or any phenomena whatsoever as this or these dharmas. So as even one cannot be determined as such, how much more so hundreds of ones? How much more so hundreds of thousands of ones? How much more so hundreds of thousands of nayutas, of kotas of ones? Such is what is meant as immeasurable and incalculable. Such in this true aspect is infinite. This one, all ones, are exactly identical as being only an instantaneous reflection of an inescapable and spontaneous interdependence merely seeming to be individuated by habits coming to be established from beyond any thought or knowledge of this process of reification, hereby creating, first of all, this duality called thought itself, ignorance, so as to attempt to determine some separatedness of an illusion of even this non-existent oneness, an appearing of something from the essentially pure infinite space, awareness, as ground of any and all being. Suchness is a wholeness at once of space and primordial awareness. Here is neither one, nor parts of one, neither many individual ones, nor none. As suchness is beyond thought and measurement, such is as suchness is. That page alone, we would do well to study repeatedly to start to inculcate this vision, this other kind of seeing. All beings are understood for as cognizant mind. These Buddhas naturally realize immeasurable non-existence of space as immeasurable non-extinction of mind. Buddha mind, as this infinite continuum is neither produced nor sustained in any time, cognized neither production nor cessation, neither gives nor requires any support. Tathagatas realize thoughts as outflows. In other words, they're separate. They're like a continuum of, like, think Star Trek, just this huge, massive sheet of energy. And every now and again, as this sheet is just, it looks like it's moving, but it may not be. It's just quiescent energy, and it has in its quiescence some dissonance, and every now and again there's a little burp of of concentrations of energy. That's a whole, that could be a whole universe, it could be an entire lifetime, it could be an entire planetary life cycle. That's all it is. It's nothing else than what everything is. It just perceives itself for a moment and has the great egotistical mind of believing that that makes it distinct, when in fact it is not. There are other poetic analogies, like Nagarjuna would say that we You and I are like waves of an ocean. For a moment, while we form, we think of ourselves as a thing. We even label it a wave. Namarupa. You can't have a form without a name. You can't have a name without a form, right? Namarupa, a wave. But when that wave hits the shore and recedes back into the ocean, it's not a wave. It's just ocean. It's a it's a it's a quality of the surface of the ocean. It's just the ocean. Now, see, I want to be careful here. I'm going to interject something. Even as you're listening to this and here and thinking about it, and I'm going to stop here for today. I really want you to read this book. There's a tendency, as I'm reading it myself, to think, well, this is kind of nihilist. It kind of says we're not real things, and so life is meaningless. It's just, and this is what an arhat or a pratyeka Buddha gets to, not constantly, but there's a possibility, and there was a lot of this early on, in the few hundred years after Shakyamuni died. A lot of these early Hinayana texts and practicants thought very nihilistically, that don't exist anyway, so I'm going to go into perfect bliss of nothingness. And that's how they interpreted emptiness, nothingness, all of this. We know as Mahayanas, this isn't the case. It's not nothingness, it's no thingness. It's all potential. It's all this quiescent energy. It's all this, there's no other English word but potential. And he says it himself in the sutra. That's translation, but so anyway, we're approaching an hour, so I'm trying to limit myself to that for these. But I think we got into some of the meat today. I hope it helps you see the validity of the Lotus Sutra and what it's taking for granted, so to speak, that you already know. So that's my effort in this series, is to show what the Lotus Sutra actually represents, more than just the words within the sutra, but what those words are built on and what they represent, to help you understand why the Lotus Sutra and how to properly practice it, how to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish as you chant, as you meditate, what that unity with the Buddha mind actually means for you in daily life, not just some fanciful things you do on the weekends or morning and night. It's a hell of a lot more than that. It's about your every moment of your waking life. And with that, I'm going to stop talking, if that's possible. Thank you so much for joining in. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.